All right, so welcome everyone. So I think we can start. Today we have Tiffany Hu, and she is a dear friend and colleague. So I and Tiffany did our PhD in the same lab, and I have known her since 2015. So she is currently a staff data scientist at Riot Games in working on building AI bots for video games. She obtained her PhD and master's degree in cognitive science at the University of California, Irvine, and a double bachelor's degree in cognitive science and computer science from the University of California at Berkeley. During her PhD, she worked on brain-inspired algorithms for spatial navigation and learning in robots. Her past robotic experience includes telepresence robots for education, outdoor ground robots for search and rescue, and mentoring students at all age groups in robotics competitions. She has recently co-authored a textbook called Robotics, Connecting the Brain, Body, and Environment, a book that discusses robots that are modeled after aspects of the human brain. So that is already like a great profile in her booming career, and I wish her all the best. So without further ado, please go ahead, Tiffany. Thank you.
Thanks, Chirag, for the introduction. And it's a great pleasure to be here and to talk about AI and robotics. So let me just share my screen. And is that visible? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so let's get started. Throughout human history, there has always been this idea that perhaps we can create machines that think and act like we do. And so even as far back as the year 1206, there was an inventor in Mesopotamia named Al-Jazari, and he had the very first example that we know of musical robots, or of robots. And they're basically these tiny little musician robots that were powered entirely by hydraulics. Then in 1495, Leonardo da Vinci had his mechanical knight invention. And this knight was able to move its arms and legs and head by itself. Then in 1921, the actual term of robots was invented. And it was invented in this play called Rossum's Universal Robots. And in this play, there were these people they were called robots. And they were created by humans, and their job was to just work in factories and basically be the human's slave. But then over time, the robots got tired of it and they rebelled, and they tried to take over the human race. So you can see throughout human history, people have had a lot of different thoughts about robots, both positive and negative. And then even today in the public perception of robots, you can see that same positive and negative feeling. So in many Hollywood depictions of robots, they're often these very evil and clever beings that are trying to take over humans, but also they also have positive portrayals of robots, like in cartoons or in Star Wars, where there are some robots that interact alongside humans, and they have hopes and dreams just like humans do. So then this positive and negative feeling is also seen in the robots that are present today. So this company, Boston Dynamics, they're well known for releasing their demonstrations of their robots. And a couple of years ago, they released this one video of their robot called Spot. And it's this dog-shaped robot. And so this robot is walking up to a door, and it wants to get through the door and escape. And so it asks its friend to come and open the door with its gripper hand. And the robot was able to open the door and then hold the door open for his friend. So back at the time, this was a really impressive demo, and I mean, it still is, and it's also kind of a little bit scary to some people. So then more recently, Boston Dynamics has released a more positive demonstration, and they're just showing all their robots that are able to do these dance moves And it's also really impressive, like all the complexity of the movements that they can do and how similar it is to like the way humans actually move. And so you can see that robotics has come a long way in human history, and there are a lot of different skills and expertise that needs to come together to make these robots work as well as they do. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the different subfields of robotics. So the first subfield is perception. So without perception, the robot can't perceive anything about the world around it. And perception can involve modalities that are very similar to what humans have. So there's visual, auditory, and haptic. And so on the robot, these would be different sensors like microphone, the camera, or like a touch screen. But then there are also different senses that humans do not have, for like such as those for distance sensing. And that would include something like a LiDAR or like an ultrasound sensor that could detect the distance of objects that are like around the robot. So each of these sensors is a challenge to then connect to the robot. But then there's a further challenge on top of that called multimodal processing. And that's where you have to integrate all of these sensors together to make like a cohesive sense of the world. So for example, if you have like a car and the car, there's a pedestrian walking in front of the car, and then the camera can see the pedestrian, but also like the LiDAR can detect the pedestrian, then it needs to be able to integrate all of these signals together and know like that they're all detecting the same thing. And so there are a lot of data sets out there that are helping researchers better understand this challenge of multimodal processing. So then once the robot is able to perceive the world, another interesting challenge is then how the robot can navigate around the world. And so another subfield of robotics is called SLAM and navigation. And SLAM stands for simultaneous localization and mapping. And that's where you put a robot into an unfamiliar room and it's able to create a map of the environment while also locating itself within the map. Then once the robot has this map, then it needs to navigate through it. And so within the challenge of navigation, there are like, there's short term and there's long term. So short term is like reacting to like obstacles that suddenly appear in front of the robot. And long term is like if you have the robot that wants to go from one room to another room, then it needs to plan that long term route to go like maybe all the way across a building to get to its destination. So then another challenge of robotics is then localization and manipulation. Locomotion. So locomotion is just like how the robot moves around the environment, and that can be many different ways, like flying or being underwater, or just like going on wheels like a car. But one of the most challenging forms of locomotion is humanoid walking. So just like walking the way a human does. And you saw earlier in the Boston Dynamics video that that robots can already like behave quite similarly, like balance on two legs and walk and even dance. But here's another example of a walking robot. And this was actually done, I think at least 10 years ago, maybe probably more, but this is the passive walker that was made at Cornell. And what's interesting about this walking robot is that it doesn't require any external energy or computation. It's just, all it's using is gravity, and it's swinging one leg in front of the other and kind of like on a declining surface. So like it's kind of falling into the step in a very natural, like human-like way. And then it's like some other challenges that robots face is like how to actually like pick up objects and interact with them. And so like grasping is very difficult in some cases. Like it's very easy to grasp a cube or something, but it's very difficult to manipulate like a piece of cloth or paper. So one fairly recent example of like manipulating an object was done by OpenAI. And they trained this robot or this hand to solve a Rubik's Cube with just one hand. And that is already very difficult for humans to do. But what's even more impressive is that the robot was able to figure out how to do this all by itself. So it started with basically no knowledge, and it was just making a bunch of random movements. But then over time, it learned which movements were important or which movements were necessary for solving the Rubik's Cube. They use this technique called reinforcement learning, which I'll go into a little bit in the later slides. So then yet another subfield of robotics is swarm robotics, and that's when you are looking at how a bunch of robots like interact with each other. And so in swarm robotics, there's an idea of collective intelligence. And that's where you have a lot of individual units, and they may be quite simple and performing simple functions. But when you look at a whole group of these units, they can do very complex functions. So this was an experiment done at Harvard, and there's all these tiny little robots, and I think they're using vibration to move around. And each of these individual robots has a simple rule that if there's a wall on the side of it, then it will continue to follow this wall until until it's no longer able to like continue going along the wall. So it's like a very simple rule for each individual robot, but then the end result is like it can do some complex behavior, like make different shapes. So this is like an example of a self-organizing system where there's no like central coordinator that's telling the robots what to do, but through a bunch of their like interactions with each other, they're able to create this really complex behavior. One interesting thing about these systems is that they're largely dependent on these like seeds that are put into the system. Like in this case, they put like these four little robots that they placed by hand, and then it has like a great outcome on like what the final outcome of the system is. Yeah, and then finally, another subfield is social robotics. So how do humans interact with the robots? And so here we have a bunch of challenges, like what kind of interface to use. You can use a graphical user interface, or you could have a back and forth conversation, or you can like learn how to read each other's hand gestures and communicate non-verbally. And so here's one example of social robotics where they're using a small robot to see if it can help contribute to the social development of children. And so this robot is called the Now robot, I think, and it's teaching the child some simple concepts like of colors and numbers. It's also designed to be like a very small and friendly looking robot for the social purposes. So those are just like a few of the subfields of robotics. And now I'm going to talk about what are the tools that are used to program these intelligent robots. So I like to split the programming strategies into like two different categories. So one is like the more traditional method, and then one is like the more recent methods that people are trying out. So in the more traditional methods, there's control theory and statistics. And control theory is basically that you have like a set of equations based on physics, and you have like an equation to model like the amount of error that's in a system. So on the left here is a diagram of the cart pole problem. So that's where you have like a cart that's on wheels, and there's like a pole that the cart is trying to balance, and then you can go like back and forth to balance that pole. And so it models this whole system as like a set of equations, and then and it models like the controls of like going left and right, and then it figures out like the optimum amount of control of left and right to minimize that error and make the angle of the pole like as close to 90 degrees as possible. And then on the other hand, we have statistics, which is used a lot for like helping the robot have beliefs about the world. in a very like noisy environment. So for example, let's say you have a robot and it's going along a hallway and there are 3 doors, and the robot the robot has a map of this hallway, but it doesn't know where it's located. But the robot has like one sensor, which is that it can sense whether it's in front of a door or not. So like at first the robot has like some like a statistical distribution of like where it thinks it's located and it along the hallway. And like if the robot detects a door, then it knows it could be at one of 3 different locations. But then like over time, the robot like moves forward and detects like a second door, then its beliefs are updated because it knows like, oh, I passed 2 doors, so I must not be at the first door anymore. And that's like the general idea behind this technique called Kalman filtering, which is like a statistical method of updating your beliefs about the world. So those are like the more traditional methods, but there are also more recent methods that are being explored. And one of the big ones is called deep reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning can be described with this framework that describes the relationship between an agent and an environment. And in this case, the agent would just be like the robot. And so the agent is able to perform like some actions in the environment. So you could think of it like some actions like going up, down, left, and right. And then once the agent performs an action, then it changes the environment. And then the environment gets into a new state. And then also sometimes the environment may also like give a reward to the agent or the robot. So for example, like let's say a robot is wandering around and looking for like food or something. So it goes like up, down, left, right randomly until it runs into like some food, and then it receives a reward. And then because of that reward, the robot is able to know like which actions led to the reward. And then over time, it can learn how to do the correct actions. So that's the idea of reinforcement learning. Then recently, researchers have added this deep neural network component. So they use neural networks to perform this like reinforcement learning, which makes it be able to do really complex functions. And so the basic idea behind the neural network is that you're running a bunch of computations through multiple like layers. So at the first layer, you just get the input, which could be like the state. And then as the computation goes through each of these layers, it gets more and more complex, and it combines the information from the previous layers, so that finally it gets to the output, which could be something like an action. And so using this idea of deep reinforcement learning, there have been a lot of really cool demonstrations in the past few years. And the first, I think like one of the first was that they were able to show that they could use this method to defeat humans in some Atari video games. And then in 2017, they were able to use this method to defeat the best human player of Go. And this was considered a really amazing feat, because Go has so many different board states, like more board states than the number of atoms in the solar system. And so like they like people thought that this was an unsolvable challenge, but then they were able to solve it with reinforcement learning. And then even more recently, like they were able to use this technique to play the game of diplomacy. And so that's this game where there's like a board of like Europe, and you're supposed to like take over like different territories and negotiate with the other players to try to take over as much territory as you can. And so like it involves a lot of like deception and conversation, but they were able to get this AI to actually play humans and win at the game. So it was like very impressive. So that's like kind of a summary of the main techniques that are used in AI and robotics. And now I want to cover some applications of it that are being used today. So robotics is currently used in manufacturing and logistics. So they can be used in warehouses, and they can be used in factories to help with like assembly and monitoring of processes. So in most cases, the robots are used in a very like controlled environment where they know exactly what's in the environment, and they're like the humans are pretty far away from the robots so that there's no like safety issues. But more and more they're figuring out how to make the robots more intelligent and have like understanding of the scene and have better activity recognition so that they can actually work alongside humans and understand what's going on so that they can like work together safely. Another application is autonomous vehicles. And so here's just a video of an autonomous vehicle, and it has to perform a lot of functions like from the perception, so it has to accurately detect the presence of other vehicles and of like pedestrians, and it has to perform a lot of very challenging tasks. Like for instance, if the car is at an intersection, sometimes like there could be no traffic signals, and the car has to predict the right timing to like turn at the intersection. So in autonomous vehicles, they have come up with different levels to describe the amount of autonomy. And so level 0 is like having no automation at all. And that's when like just a human is driving the car normally. Then it goes all the way up to level 5, where the human is not involved at all and the car is doing all the driving. And in fact, the human is even like unable to take over if they want to. So that's like completely full automation. And so the goal is to eventually get to level 5. And so level 0, 1, and 2, like it's already in today's vehicles. We're like continuing to work on like 3 and 4. And as for level 5, I think like to reach true level 5, we're still like a few years like, or we're still quite a bit away from reaching that level 5. Yeah, so then another application of robotics is in personal assistance. And so that's like helping humans out with their daily tasks. And so like one example of this would be like those vacuum cleaner robots, and that can vacuum your house. But they can also eventually they can also do more complicated tasks, like actually helping people out in the house, like there's like, for example, like there's like the elderly population, and there's like population that stays at home most of the time because they have an illness. And so potentially robots could help them with like social things and also functional things like getting items or helping the human in some other way. And so this video here is actually an experiment that I worked on with Hirak at UC Irvine. And here we were studying this robot called the Toyota Human Support Robot. And we were studying whether students who were at home could use this robot to attend school. So there are like a lot of children who have to stay at home due to some illness, but they would still like to attend school. And so we were looking at the features of this robot and seeing like how well a student could learn in using this method of attending school. And so like the robot has to like behave a little bit differently from humans in some ways, and like have an interface and like interact with the teacher a little bit differently. But we saw that the students really enjoyed using this robot, and it was more exciting to them than to just like use Zoom or some other technology. Yet another application is search and rescue. And so that's where robots are doing tasks that may be like very dangerous for humans to do. And it can be in all sorts of situations. Like they could be some drones in the air that are searching for like victims in a disaster, or they could be underwater, or they could be like on the ground. And in this, some of the unique challenges for search and rescue is that there's often like a lack of infrastructure in the area. So the robots have to be very robust, and they have to work on low power. And then finally, another like application is entertainment. And so I work at a gaming company, and I work on developing AI bots for games. And so like here's one example of like, this isn't from the company I work at, but so OpenAI was working on this demonstration of whether AI bots could play with humans at a game of Dota. And so if you're unfamiliar with the game of Dota, um, it's like two teams of 5 versus 5, and they're all normally humans. And each of these human players get to pick a character out of like a very, very large set of characters. And each character has its own unique set of abilities. And so all the interactions between these 10 characters can be extremely complex. And it's also like a real-time environment. So they're not like taking turns. And it's like, it's very dynamic and really difficult. But they were able to show like that they can defeat human players at this game. And so the goal, like at the company I'm working at Riot Games, is that perhaps we could further develop this technology to actually make games that are fun for people to play. Yeah, then another example of robotics used in entertainment is at theme parks. So this is actually a robot on the Avatar ride in Disney World in Florida. And yeah, so Disney has been studying like robots that they call animatronics used in their theme parks, and that they've been doing for like several decades now. And their robots are always like getting more and more realistic and interesting to look at. Yeah, so those were some of the applications of robots today, but then there's also future challenges that we face as robots continue to be used in daily life. So one of the challenges is human-like behavior. So robots, of course, are designed to try and like imitate humans and think and act like humans, but there's still like a big gap between the two. So there's this paper by Brendan Lake and his colleagues in 2015 that tries to break down some of these concepts or some of these things that humans do a lot better than robots. So for example, humans are good at building models of the world, and they're good at compositional thinking, meaning like if you have one concept and another concept, they can instantly combine the two concepts and come up with like something new. Where for robots and AI, it's like much more difficult to do this, and they often require like a lot of training time, like several hours or days to do this like kind of combination of ideas that a human can do very instantly. So for example, like they came up with this task of character recognition, where they made up a bunch of fake characters, and they told like a human to like memorize what this character is, and then the human was able to like just look at one example, and then it knew like what this character is compared to other characters. And then the human can also do different things like break the character apart into different strokes, and it can also invent new characters that are similar to the one that it was presented with. And you can also think of this in terms of real life objects. So if you show the human like different objects with wheels, like a car or like a motorcycle, they're able to like decompose this car or motorcycle into its different components and know how these objects are similar and how they're different. Another challenge that we face is safety. So as robots interact with humans more and more, there's a potential that there could be like some dangerous moments, because like the robots they have a lot of power, and if they're working right next to a human, yeah, you just have to like make sure that the robot is not going to perform anything dangerous. And so there's formal methods that are used to verify the output or the behavior of the robot and make sure like that there's no way that this robot could possibly get into this dangerous zone. And then another important thing is transparency, meaning that if a robot performs, like if a robot did something that it wasn't supposed to, are people able to look inside of the robot and figure out like, well, what happened there? Like, why did it perform this action? And like having that transparency is really important, because you can troubleshoot what went wrong, or if something is like not behaving as intended, you could like stop the robot before something bad can happen. And then another challenge is the ethical and legal side. So as we have robotics and AI in society more, we need to focus on helping humans in an equitable way and not replacing humans. And we also want to make sure that it is also not harming the environment. And so many people have thought of like different laws or rules that could help us with forming these like ethical and legal policies for dealing with robots. And one of them was the science fiction writer Isaac Asimov. He came up with these laws of robotics that include things like the robot may not injure a human being, the robot must obey orders given to it by humans, and the robot must protect its own existence as long as the first two laws are not in conflict. Also on the legal side, some countries are starting to come up with some policies on how we could deal with AI. And they mostly involve things like transparency. So like any AI that wants to be used needs to have that the ability to explain itself. And then one other like kind of interesting thing on the ethics side is like there's this philosophical like problem called the trolley problem. So this is where like you have a trolley that's going along a track, and the trolley is set to like there are 5 people on the track, and the trolley will hit these 5 people if it continues along the track. But then like there's a human with a lever, and if the human pulls the lever, the trolley is will go off to this alternative track and only hit 1 person. So it's like a dilemma, because if the human like pulls the lever, then it's actually actively killing 1 human being, versus if they don't do anything, then 5 human beings are killed. And it's like saying like what is the ethical thing to do in this situation? And this is actually a real problem, because we have self-driving cars, and they often need to make like some quick decision or trade-off. And like this is definitely like an unsolved thing like that people are debating about, but self-driving cars are already like trying to be used. And so it's like just something we need to be more cautious about. So in conclusion, robotics is a multidisciplinary effort. It requires a lot of different fields to come together to get these robots to work. Robotics has the potential to affect nearly every aspect of our lives, because robots are basically imitating humans. Then like anything that humans can do, potentially robots could also like be involved. And then lastly, as robotics and AI increase in society, we have to think about how to shape the policies to increase the positive impact and decrease the negative impact. Yeah, so that's it for my presentation, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany. That was really an enlightening talk. And I think everyone listening who has interest in robotics will learn a lot from it, and yeah, be inspired to do something like create some robots or teach some AI. We have already questions. So first one is from myself. So so you mentioned about autonomous vehicles as like a real life current example of robotics, which is intelligent. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering about whether these autonomous vehicles require a SLAM map to be operated safely. Mm-hmm. And so I was thinking, like, because I see all these car manufacturers making autonomous vehicles, they are mapping like big cities in the United States, but in the context of Assam, which is like a remote state in India, yeah, there is not that much companies like operating there who are like putting money to make those maps. So is it possible for like L5 automation for these vehicles to operate without a SLAM map or like a pre-mapped area, or like can it operate in an unknown situation?
I think that, yeah, I mean, it's infeasible to create like a map of every possible like area that people want to use autonomous cars in. But then like the company, there are a lot of companies that are trying to do that for like very specific cities, and then within that very specific city the car can drive safely. But yeah, it's definitely like much more challenging when you don't have that map. However, I think like you can't call a autonomous vehicle level 5 unless you can do that, and unless the car can be driven like anywhere that a human can. And that's why I think that we are quite a bit away from reaching that level 5, because like, yeah, I mean, even if you do have a full map of the environment, like that, if that map changes, I mean, the map could change like on a weekly basis, then like how's the car going to handle that? And also like humans don't need such a detailed map either. And I think like you really can't have full automation without that. And yeah, it's still an open challenge right now. And yeah, something that I don't think we have reached yet.
Okay, yeah, thanks for your answer. We have more questions. So one from here I know, Nat. Do you see an important role for robotics in healthcare? Where is it now and where is it going?
Well, for healthcare, that's kind of interesting. Like also surgery for sure, like that the robotics is already used, and it's like really effective because like you can make very small like incisions in the patient, whereas before, like if a human was doing it, like it's a lot more invasive. So that's like one application. And like there's like more AI applications like in like analyzing X-rays. That's very effective, but I guess that's not exactly robotics. And then there's also this idea that maybe you could use humanoid robots to replace like nurses or like doctors in some sense. I think that one is the most like unknown and kind of shaky like application, because I mean, I think it's best that humans take care of other humans. But I mean, there could be some cases where that still applies. But yeah, those are the immediately off the top of my head, the applications of robotics in healthcare that I can think of.
Can I add to that a question, please?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm a doctor here. So actually, AI in robotics, as you have mentioned, is already there, like, sorry, in healthcare. So basically, you said about robots being used in surgery. So it's very widely used for quite some years now. There is a very famous robot called Da Vinci, so which is used all over the world, including in different parts of India, and many surgeons use it basically. So the arms are on top of the operating table, and the surgeon can be remote, either in that or somewhere else, and surgeries can be done more like, in a more refined way. And in many surgeries, this robot is done like on a regular basis. And yeah, that is at least one thing that I can add to your answer. So and yeah, thank you.
So does it work as a tool for the surgeon, or sorry, or does it work as like a substitute? Can it substitute the surgeon?
Good question. Actually, this is more of a tool, I would say, not substitute. And it is still a machine, like with multiple arms, and the surgeon is operating nearby. Like he or she is operating the robot and making the maneuvers, but the beauty is that the surgeon can be anywhere. I mean, not necessarily even in that room. And the arms basically can do all the, perform all the incisions and clippings and things like that. And it's done very regularly. I mean, and in India too, that Da Vinci robot is very popular. When like prostate surgery and many other abdominal surgeries, it's regularly used.
Yeah, and I heard that. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I heard that also. Like they can apply some like computer vision, so like they can maybe guide the human a little bit, like to maybe you can correct me if you know about this, but like they could like maybe identify something and like on screen, and then the doctor can then like use this computer vision to help them in the surgery.
Right. And they will have a screen where they see what is going on, like, I mean, inside the human body, like what are the steps that are being done by the robot, and then, like that can be modified. And in fact, many of the small or finer surgeries are better done with the robots than with human hand and eye. But still, like, definitely someone has to coordinate and, operate it. and make sure that everything is okay. Yeah. But the robot is not going to decide which artery to be ligated or which part is to be removed or things like that. That's still decided by the surgeon. But only the function is done by the robot rather than the human hand holding the scalpel and things like that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so we learned a lot about robots in the surgery room. So the next question is about, what about robots and independent thinking? What happens when robots are able to think? Will it be a threat to human race or society?
Yeah, I think that's like one debate that people often have about robots and AI in general, especially like recently AI has done a lot in like being able to create art and like being able to write really long essays and like creative tasks that like independent thinking tasks, I guess, that humans, like we used to think only humans could do them. And then the answer of like the debate of whether it's going to be a threat to humankind, like I think it like inevitably like there's going to be an adjustment period where some jobs may be replaced and like some negative things will happen, but I personally believe that humans have they have a great ability to adapt, and there's some things that humans will be able to do that robots will never be able to do, simply because we have like a human body and we're interacting in the world with like our very specific human body. And eventually humans will be able to work alongside the robots and come up with a way that like both of the strengths can be combined in a collaborative way instead of like an adversarial way. So that's just my personal belief that that's like an open debate and something that when you create policies, you have to like think more about and think like, should we be going this direction with robots, or should we just not go that direction because it's too risky?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they also gave an example of a recent news where there is a company called sorry, I forgot the name. Do not pay. So they made like a robot lawyer who will basically act as your attorney in court cases. So I think yeah, that kind of inspired that question, whether is it like a threat? But I think the robot lawyer can go as long as the laws go. So if laws are fine, then the robot lawyer cannot, I think, make like a trick to make you pay for the parking ticket, right? So
yeah, that is very interesting.
Yeah, I did not hear about that either. Okay. Another question. Web3 has revolutionized various industries, including gaming. With a major shift from traditional gaming platforms, blockchain-based games have become one of the leading methods for gamers to make money, as they are paving the way for a new era in gaming. We can say that the gaming industry does not need Web3, but gamers might need. My question is, how is the gaming industry getting ready for that?
To be honest, I don't really know like a whole bunch about how the games are being applied to Web3. I know like a lot of my colleagues are interested in that. And like, yeah, a lot of gaming companies are preparing for that and also preparing for like a new genre of games that uses blockchain. But then like with the recent negative events involving like blockchain, there has been some like slowdown in that area. And that's basically all I can say on the subject, because I personally like don't think about that problem very much. So yeah, so sorry about that.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we got the idea. So one more question.
Can I interrupt 1 second?
Yeah, please go ahead.
One of the attendees today, Pritam Raskwas, he wants to ask a question directly to Tiffany. So Pritam, can you go ahead?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Pritam, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, actually, I had the Web3 question only. Already, actually, that was asked. like I really want to know about like how the gaming industry is actually getting ready for that. Like what platform are they coming up with in future? Yeah, now it's crypto winter is going on, but in future, hopefully, market will again pick up, and once the trust will be built, once this winter will be over. So how like as you are working in a industry, right, the gaming industry, how like they are setting up that like team or future projects in the directions. So that's why I want to know about it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I wish I could give you more like insight on the blockchain side, but yeah, to be honest, I don't want to say like anything wrong or like incorrect about what the gaming industry is doing in blockchain. So I guess I just have to leave the question kind of unanswered because I personally like don't work in the field very much.
No, yeah, that's fine. Blockchain is a big new technology developing independently or like for the most part, separately from AI. So it's a completely different domain. Maybe we can talk about that in another day. I don't think everyone will be very familiar with all that in this. So yeah, we can maybe move ahead. So another question, what kind of AI models are used for autonomous vehicles?
There's like I guess a bunch of different AI models that are used. Like, I think you could split them into different categories. So like the first category is like the perceptual category. So like being able to use the sensors of the autonomous vehicle to identify like different objects in the scene. And then another like category is the controls. So like what's the best way to like swerve around this obstacle that appeared right in front of you. And then there's like some higher level kind of algorithms of like understanding the world around you, like, and understanding some very complex situations. So for example, if you go to an intersection and there are like cars on every side of the intersection, often like a human will have to figure out like the dynamics of what's going on and figure out who to go, like who should go first. And so that's like a kind of a scene understanding or like a contextual awareness that the vehicle needs to have to like figure that out. So some strategies for autonomous vehicles they will separate these algorithms very cleanly and just like have a pipeline to connect all these modules together. But some others, they'll try to create one system that just, you know, has all the inputs and then just has like the output of like how to drive the car, which they call like an end-to-end solution. And yeah, it's like individual companies will have like different like strategies along this spectrum that combine all of the different algorithms together.
Yeah, and also I remember a few years ago, at least, there were really good like videos and lectures on like building autonomous vehicles from, I think, Udemy. So yeah, so you can also maybe find those and learn all those the algorithms that are being used or needed. If anyone is interested. So yeah, next question. Lots of questions, so it's an interesting talk. That's great. So for graduate studies in AI and robotics, which are the top programs? Are there any specific backgrounds students should have in order to apply for graduate programs in AI and robotics?
Yeah, I will start with like the prerequisite stuff. I mean, you definitely want to have a strong foundation in like math and like programming. So the math, like especially linear algebra, maybe like dynamical systems as well, like for robotics, especially if you're interested in the actual like hardware of the robots, then you should look at like dynamical systems and like multivariable calculus maybe. Then yeah, on the programming side, you want to be comfortable with programming in, say, like the most popular language, I guess, would these days is like for Python, but also like C++, those two languages. And but I mean, there's a lot. It depends on what aspect of robotics you want to do. Like if you want the more algorithmic type, then you go more towards theory. But if you're more interested in the hardware, then that's kind of like a different field where you also may be doing like electronics and signal processing. So yeah, like I guess the first thing would be like to look more into exactly which kind of robotics you want to do, and it has like different foundations. As for like the schools, like I am admittedly like mostly thinking about the ones that like North America, just because like I live here. But like I could think like probably like MIT, Berkeley, like Stanford, like those are the ones that kind of come to my head when thinking about like computer science and engineering and like AI and stuff. Like mostly I think any technicals, like mostly there's a big overlap between like the technical schools and the schools that are good at robotics. Yeah, that's what I can think of at the moment.
Yeah, I'd say it will apply to India also. I think most of the technical schools, the IITs and IITs or other universities that teaches engineering will probably have a robotics class or maybe robotics club, where I think if you're interested as a student, you can maybe join that class and see how you like it. And as Tiffany said, it's an interdisciplinary effort. So maybe a lot of people will be needed with diverse backgrounds with these engineering skills. Next question, is there any role for students of social sciences, such as economics or psychology, in the development of AI and robotics? That's a really good question, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I come from the field of cognitive science, which is very close to psychology. And like we have also worked with people like from social sciences, like the education department. So like if you're interested in like social robotics and how you could use robots to teach like children, then yeah, there's like a whole like subfield within those social science areas that they're just looking at using robots like in the classroom. And so yeah, for social sciences, there's definitely like a role to play and like their own like small expertise in that area.
Yeah, and like the ethical side, for example, and like those, human emotion understanding, those sides require like lots of studies on humans, right? So, yeah, so definitely a role to play, I think, for to develop AI that operates in operate within, like work alongside human. So next question is from Facebook. Like someone watching on Facebook asked, can we make a way so that we can help the deaf and dumb people to communicate with normal people who don't know the symbolic language with the help of AI?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I mean, okay, just listing off the top of my head, like captioning has gotten a lot better due to AI. And like there was recently there's a technology that was called Whisper, and it was like very good at transcribing audio, that like the audio could be very messy, or there could be like very different like accents, but they're still able to pick up on it and transcribe it very well. So I think AI is making a lot of strides in that area. And then I've also heard of like devices that can help you like interpret sign language and like translate it to like a spoken language. So there could be something there that robotics can work with, but I think that's still like pretty exploratory work. But yeah,
and that's a
captioning
perception problem. Yeah. So
yeah,
I think it should be doable. I think if enough effort is put into it.
Quickly, on that same question, I think one of the attendees of the meeting, Bishakha, wants to say something. Maybe Bishakha can ask herself. Yeah. Bishakha, are you there? if we can unmute her.
Is she here on Zoom?
Yeah, on Zoom. So
Okay.
Vishakha, can you
Hello,
unmute?
sir.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
you are.
Yeah, okay. So basically, we had our final project that I did, like, it was basically on um, hand sign recognition. It was a sign language detection one. So we used a model which is called convolution neural network, CNN, and it gave an efficiency of about 85%. So I just want to ask whether are there more efficient models that can be used so that we can better communicate with deaf and dumb people, like other than CNN.
Yeah. Well, can I ask for the CNN? Is it just like taking one image at a time, or does it take like a sequence of images and like connect the images together, or is it like just one at a time that you were working on?
Bisaka, are you there? Bisaka, you can please unmute and respond to Tiffany's question.
Yeah, it's okay if they're like,
okay, it's okay.
Yeah, I can
Somehow
respond, which is just like there are.
Hello.
Oh.
Now I'm able to unmute.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Actually, we didn't at that time. We didn't use images. We used a data set, like Amni's data set, and that
Okay.
kind of.
I see. Yeah, I mean, I guess my response would just be that there are a lot of like models that can process sequences, and I think that would be pretty important if you are doing like sign language. So things like LSTM models or like transformer models, things that can process like a long sequence of input, which I mean, the transformer models specific, like especially, are the ones used in like all those like amazing AI demonstrations, and I think that would probably be a way of like the strategy to go for like doing sign language as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. So next question is again, it's from YouTube actually. What do you think about the company Neuralink? Will it be possible to attach our brain with a computer the way they promised?
Yeah, I mean, maybe someday we will be able to, I mean, okay, so for Neuralink, from what I understand, like this problem of brain-computer interfaces has been worked on for a long time before Neuralink was, before Neuralink came about. And I don't know much, I'm not very close to what Neuralink does, but a lot of people say like they're doing work that's quite similar to what was already done, but maybe like improved in the methodology. But yeah, I think it's possible to create some sort of interface, but as the claims may be a little bit exaggerated for the progress that they've made so far. And also there are a lot of alternative methods of doing some of these interfaces. Like for instance, like, if you want to use just your brain to like type words, there are a lot of alternative methods of like, even if you have a small muscle in your body, that muscle can probably be adapted to like input text in a much more effective way and less invasive way than like putting an implant in your brain. And so while I do think it's possible, I mean, some of it is possible, not all of it is possible. And there are also like a lot of alternatives to the things that they want to do with that technology.
Yeah. And will it be really cost effective so that it can be adopted in a mass way
oh yeah, that I think that's probably like a bit overblown, because first, I mean, even if it was cost effective, you would have to agree to have this device surgically, some sort of surgical modification to yourself, that if you don't need that, then why should you elect for like this risky surgery? But I mean, I guess it's up to you if you want to do it, and we'll see like what they actually come up with.
Yeah, that's an interesting new development. And yeah, there are also other companies we can look up which are maybe doing maybe even more advanced stuff than that. One more question. Can you suggest any books for students to learn about robotics in AI? You recently wrote your own book.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can pitch my own book. But well, okay, so I actually have some books right here. So there's this one like book called Artificial Intelligence by
I think your background is blurred. So
okay, let me okay, it's very hard to see, but I'll just say the title. Artificial Intelligence by Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig. That's like a pretty classic book that just introduces the ideas of AI in general. But there's also a book called Probabilistic Robotics that who I think who wrote that, Sebastian Thrun. But do you remember, Hiro?
I forgot.
Oh, okay, but that's also a very famous book. And also machine learning in general, which there's a book called Pattern Recognition and Machine Learning by Bishop. And so like for me, I just like, they're very huge textbooks, so you don't want to just read it cover to cover, but it's like a good book to own so that you can kind of flip through. But if you wanted like an introduction, I would probably just suggest like going to find some like courses, like those free courses on the internet, because they can like describe it a lot in a much simpler way, and you don't have to like read through all these equations and stuff that like for me is pretty difficult to stay focused and stuff. So but yeah, those are the textbooks. And then yeah, I recently like co-wrote a textbook with my PhD advisor called Robotics, connecting the brain, body, and environment. So that's talking more about like neuroscience plus robotics together. So if that interests you, then you can maybe take a look at that book too.
Yeah, so I just put the link for the book by Peter Norvig. But as Tiffany said, I think the best resource could be one of those free lectures, video lectures. And I think they will have reference to those books as well.
I found a link to Tiffany's book. So that's the one on Amazon. So one can look at it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are no more questions. I'll maybe ask one question myself. So you mentioned about the recent methods in deep reinforcement learning in robotics. So if one wants to start, suppose, learning those recent methods, or like what do they need, like for computer setup? Can they run those like deep reinforcement learning platforms, like for example, the graphics platforms that are needed, for example, in general computer, or do they need like a proper setup? Or what are the tools that would be needed to start working on those?
Just to start with, I think you don't need very much. I mean, I think like any laptop that you can program on is good to start with, because like when you're first learning to implement these like networks, you don't want to start with this like giant model and start training it for hours. You want to like figure out how the equations actually work and come up with a small toy example. And in those cases, I mean, they're like, you don't need really fancy hardware to do that. But once you do master like those basic concepts, there are other ways, like if you don't have the proper setup, that you could, like, I think Google was offering like some free compute for like if for educational purposes, if you want to like train your own small like AI model, then like you could do it for free. I don't know if that's still the case, probably, but yeah, there's definitely ways that you yourself do not have to own like a fancy setup to get started.
Yeah.
Tiffany, can you please unshare your screen so then you can be more visible?
Oh yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do not see any more question here. Is there any more question in either Facebook or YouTube?
No, I don't see any questions too. And actually, Anupam, are you there? So that let me introduce one of our team members, Dr. Anupam Saikia. So he is a professor of mathematics at IIT Guwahati. Anupam, can you hear or are you able to speak there? So we also have with us, I think, Dr. Shamanta Hazarika. So you know him, Hirok, right?
Yeah. I was a
Do
student.
you want to introduce him to our audience?
Yeah, definitely. So I can talk about introduce Dr. Hazarika. So yeah, I'm fortunate to really learn from him. So I took his AI class, and also we had a robotics club that we made first founded in Tejpur University. So I worked with Professor Hazarika a lot, and if Professor Hazarika wants to say a few words about today's lecture, or any suggestion or feedback.
Can you unmute yourself, Professor Hazarika, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Hirok. It's nice seeing your effort and all on popularizing AI and robotics. Tiffany, thank you very much for such a wonderful talk. I really loved it. Just to add one point from the discussion, level 3 of robotic surgery, we have arrived at in stitchering. So stitchering of things is still level 3. Rest of it is level 1, and in autonomous robotic surgery. So people who are not aware of what we are talking of in levels of autonomy, there are 5 autonomy levels of a robot, if you really want to say it. So 0 or 1, if you see, is about human intervention, and finally the robot taking over in L5. So robot taking over is in surgery is still science fiction, as one of our participants had very clearly identified. I couldn't really identify who that person was, but it was interesting to see that people are interested in AI and robotics. Just for a little bit of information for the audience, in Guwahati itself, a very small city in India, we now have robotic surgeon. So there is robotic surgery. There is a varices robot that performs robotic surgery in one of the local hospitals. So that's where AI is going. I really appreciate your efforts. Thank you very much. I only came to know about it today from Professor Anupam Saikia, and thank you for having me and allowing me to join our talk. Thank you very much. And once again, I would like to thank Tiffany for such a wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hazarika, and thank you, Hirok, and thank you, Anupam, for informing and introducing Dr. Hazarika to our platform. And maybe in the future we can invite you to give a talk to our audience on our platform. And also, I think I learned, Hirok, that one of your friend Pritam is there, who has joined from Hong Kong, I guess, right?
Yeah. I think Pritam asked the question about the Web3. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Pritam.
Hi, Pritam. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah,
yes.
You are.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, thanks a lot, Tiffany, for such a nice talk. I really enjoy it. So my question was a little bit off track, because I just want to know about what is going on in that direction. Yeah, and thanks a lot for your talk, and that's all from my side. Yeah. Thank you.
I think blockchain. No, I think blockchain is really a very important technology now. People are using it for first application. Maybe it's maybe of interest to other participants. You can maybe give a talk on this in a future weekend.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Hirok. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks. Nice to hear from you.
Thanks, Shyamanta Hazarika sir, for your insights also. Thank you. Yeah.
So thank you. It seems that Hirok, we can extend the AI series with with at least 2 more talks from
Yeah, I
speakers.
think actually we
on
have 2 more
platform.
talks planned. On January 22, I'll talk about how AI sees the world, more about perception. And on February 5, a professor, Jugal Kolita, he will talk about natural language processing. So he has done lots of work in generating like Assamese like language poems and stuff for understanding the language. So I think that would be interesting as well. And yeah, and then we can extend further if we have time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we would be more than happy to have more talks on AI, because this is really an emerging field, and our students need to learn about it. The earlier they know, like, it's better for them, and definitely there are so many career options that they can explore in AI. So that would be great, Hirok. Thank you for your efforts in bringing these awesome speakers together and including yourself. And with that, I think we have come to the end of today's talk. And thank you again, Tiffany, for your time and effort, and especially for waking up early morning here in California and addressing to our audience. And as Hirok mentioned, that our next talk is by Hirok himself on January 22nd. And the title is How AI Sees the World. So hopefully we will see you at that time. And thank you again so much. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Here,
thank you, Tiffany.
You can stay back a couple of minutes if you want. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Tiffany very much for her for agreeing to give this talk really early here. So
Yeah, not a problem at all. This is really exciting to just talk with everybody.